Did you guys need to do decimals? No, unless you wanted to make sure that you were right. But otherwise, just check the formula, check the pattern. You already had the table, right? So there's A and B and C. I did not mind if you stuck it to the man the whole time. I did not. I'm getting your book up just in case we do need to access any of the problems. I'll wait on that. Okay, keep going. There's only 3 more, I think, so let me go ahead and give you guys those 3. Ooh, that's a little small. Sorry. Can we see it? So here's how the you guys taking more charge comes into play. Did I just give you guys trapezoidal problems? I did, right? Were there any homework problems that weren't the trapezoidal? That said the word Simpsons or that said approximated quadratic? Okay, good. I had other notes, and it's something that I would have exposed you to if we did have extra time, but it's not necessary. It's not on the AP test. It is in your book if you're curious about something named Simpson's rule. Technically, we kind of saw it last year when we skipped it and didn't do it in a homework problem. I didn't give you guys those homework problems because I didn't really see it as necessary for this year. But I do have some notes on it if you guys are curious. It is technically going to be saved into your guys' notes. That's why I was a little worried. I wanted us to get to homework really quickly. So I do have a little bit of notes as far as figuring out how accurate the trapezoidal is or Simpson's rule is, using Simpson's rule and seeing what it is, because Simpson's rule is a little bit interesting in that when it goes to approximate, it basically is using this cool process of how an integral of a quadratic can be expressed as a function, and then it uses that function to not approximate specifically with trapezoids, but to instead approximate with these figures that are similar to trapezoids, but use quadratic curves to get even closer, which is kind of cool. Especially when we think about some integrals that are impossible to solve, that we can get a better approximation than trapezoids by using this expression for a quadratic and how to solve that integral, and so we can use a quadratic as the upper bound kind of a trapezoid. Anyway, it's a bit snazzy, but it's not necessary for where we're going. And we're going to learn many other things about approximation that's going to help more than Simpson's rule that's not specifically on the test. But it's kind of cool if you guys want to peek at it. It's there. But otherwise, let's go back to homework. So as far as the strategy of homework questions, and maybe we're not going to be ready for it today, but I'm at least introducing it to you guys so that next week, next chapter, chapter 7, when we start implementing it more, you're ready, would be something like, and this is what was helpful for last year, as kids are checking, and as you're going through, and as we get to the end, they were already like, oh, I have a question on 23, and someone was already like, oh, I got it, grabbing a marker, going up to the board, and I was going back and marking down points. Like, that's how it worked. And then if that person had a question on it, as the person was doing it on the board, they could go up and be like, hey, can you teach this to me? Can you talk this through? Or if it was like the majority of the class, we would, and there was like lots of problems going on, we didn't want chaos to ensue. That's not ever helpful. So if it wasn't just like a one-on-one, one person going up to the board and being like, okay, hold on, talk this through with me. If it was larger, maybe that person would actually teach it to the majority of the class if it was a question a lot of people were stuck on, or I would kind of walk it through and use the person's feedback so it wasn't quite as awkward if it was a little bit rough for them. But then I'm giving points in the process, participation points, etc. So that's where I would love for us to go. Does that make sense? And another reason why is because when I was talking to the girls last night, in college you really are a little fish in a big pond and you kind of have to fight for it. Does that make sense? You have to fight for what you want and where you're going. And in classes, professors are good and all, and even TAs with discussion groups and whatnot where you're supposed to be hashing things out, they're good and all, but sometimes they're not good and all. And they have accents that you can't understand, or they have office hours that you can't really access because you have a class during, or they go on week-long trips who knows where and aren't even available. Or the TA is a grad student who's at this whole entire level and it's like, oh, I'm writing a paper, or I did this, and it isn't at all what your professor wants you to do, but let me just harp on my little soapbox and not really help you for the test that you're studying for. all of those stories came last night, and it was like, you need to be able to help each other. Now, maybe not because you're not all going, but you need to be able to be a positive contribution in a group and be able to respectfully try to glean from them at the same time, because sometimes other students are your best resource. Does that make sense? Cool. And even talking to the girls last night, they were like, oh, but I have this kid in my class who, that's who you should be. You guys are in BC, so depending on what classes you're in, that's what you should be. You should be the student who's in those discussion groups getting stronger as you're learning how to better explain, how to better analyze, how to better share your knowledge while being challenged by the questions that others might have for you. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so to that end, we might not be ready, but we're going to try. Is there anything that you guys need from this section, evens or odds? Okay, some of us need to do it this weekend and catch up. Some of us are like, no, we're pretty good. And some of us, be more vocal. If you do have a question, you're not sharing it next time. Sound good? Why am I saying that? Because if you have a question, you should know right now. Why? The odds you should already know when you walk into class because you put question marks on them last night in homework. And then the evens you just graded, you should know you have a question on. Cool? So none of this like lag time that we usually have. To that end, cool kids, I'm totally fine with you guys having fun, us putting on music, and you guys working on a review. Why? Because you're here, so why don't you get some work done so you have less this weekend? Is that cool? All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your Google Classroom to get in your review. At the same time, I'm going to go do what I've been trying to do for reviews this year. It's new, which is why I have to make it every chapter, but getting the review questions and the answers in your Google Classroom to access. But for right now, let me get the assignment. There are 3 books up here. Yeah. So Justin's going to grab all 3. Is that okay? Or Isa, who's up here? Oh, Isa is. Grab all 3 and just like hand out 2 to people that need it. Let me freeze the screen and I'm going to go, I have the book already open. Let me go try to get the pages. That way you guys can access them in Google Classroom. That's easier, right? If I just attach them in there. There we go. But for right now, spread around the pages. Or spread around the books.